You're listening to Depth Perception, supported by our patrons on Patreon. Welcome to part 2 of our deconstruction of the idea of alt-left woke culture. As I hinted in last week's introduction, this episode ends up being more about cancel culture than woke culture. Randy and I have learned not to tackle any more political topics without doing a lot more research and having a proper outline at hand. That said, we still think you'll enjoy this discussion, where we ask, sincerely, what's wrong with wokeness, and suggest that canceling may not be what you think it is. For this episode, trigger warnings for discussions of Nazism, fascism, racism, sexual assault, and state violence. I don't think there's any spoilers this time. Also, we've gone weekly as of last week, so tune in every Friday for the latest episode. We got a lot planned for October, or should I say, Spooky Tobey Maguire. Here's our show. My name's Leo Marino.
I'm Randy Marino.
Randy Marino. No, my name's Leo.
I'm Randy.
And we just got divorced, so Randy's not used to not using my last name anymore. We're here to talk about woke /PC /cancel culture. This is part 2 of a loose series that began with last week's alt-left. What is alt-left? Where we talked about the idea of the alt-left and showed, I think, that the idea of the alt-left is just a fabrication of the alt-right. Whether or not we showed that, that's true. It's not something that should be argued. And other people have amply showed that before us. This week, we wanted to talk about what is woke culture. These topics were loosely tied together in our minds because of a Reddit thread that talked about this 2 + 2 = 5 Twitter thread from Kareem Carr. So the person I think that was asking the question, which was then deleted, was saying something like, "Is this just an example of alt-left woke culture?" Or somebody said that, and we said that's an interesting phrase, and sort of zeroed in on it, and we're like, well, let's deconstruct both parts of this. And this is our attempt at deconstructing the idea of woke culture and cancel culture.
Yeah, cancel culture is a tough thing to be a proponent of. When I can't think of one example where it's panned out. People point to somebody like Harvey Weinstein, who's somebody that we brought. Well, I say we. I didn't contribute at all, but you put it in the doc, his name, and people might chalk what happened to him down to cancel culture, but that really doesn't have anything to do with it. I mean, that was just the criminal justice system of the country we live in deciding that they wanted to take down a powerful person for once.
But did they take him down even?
Did they? Yeah, I've never gone to visit the guy in prison, so I don't know how he's living right now.
He'll be in jail for a little while. He won't be in jail for as long as he's supposed to be in jail. And he has so much money.
Another name that gets brought up as somebody that was kind of taken down a peg by cancel culture is Alex Jones. Except he was deplatformed, but nothing happened to him. I mean, he got in some legal trouble over his comments regarding Sandy Hook, which I don't know. We'll get into this another time, but I don't think. Number one, I don't think he had any protection for saying those things. I mean, I don't think there's anything that justifies what he said legally. And number two, like, people get in legal trouble for things all the time. So once again, Alex Jones is somebody that I think is not canceled because he still has a platform. He can still sell his weird fake medicine. He can still do like all the nasty, rotten things InfoWars does. So, is there an example of cancel culture working? I don't think so, but I would like to see it work.
I I agree with what you're saying. I think that unfortunately it can't work. At least in the types of examples we're discussing right now, cancel culture doesn't work. There aren't situations where powerful people who have bad views get shamed publicly and then lose their power, their cultural capital, their real capital, and are no longer in the public eye. What do we want to happen to them? Do we want them to die of starvation? I'm not saying this to provoke people and to say that, you know, it's wrong to want things to happen to people that take away their power. But I think that this idea that taking a hit on someone's fame, somebody taking a hit on their fame for their actions, translates to them losing their power is a it really it reveals a fundamental um, misunderstanding of the relationship between fame and power in our culture, in our world. Uh, I mean, like, is Donald Trump president because he's famous? There's a sense in which that is true on the surface, but really he's president because he has capital and he was able to wield that capital in a way that disregarded the valence of his fame. It didn't matter if it was infamy or fame in order to increase his chances of winning a political office, which in the end of the day, I think history will show, was more or less so that he could perpetuate like his, well, what I'm trying to say is that for him it's just not just monetary capital that he's after. He is after a certain type of fame, but what I'm saying is that he's after a certain type of fame that doesn't need to be positive. So what I'm saying also when I use him as an example is that it's naive of us to think that we can just make somebody look bad in public and somehow that's justice. The injustices those people are capable of carrying out are not really accessible to us via, I don't know, manipulations of the type of public attention that they're getting. If they're getting that public attention, that's really just proof that they have power.
I think if cancel culture was going to work, it would like think about like the Amish community, right? One of the things in my mind that is a big feature of Amish life is shunning, where they essentially, remove somebody from the community without making them leave. I mean, the closest you can get to actually canceling somebody is just flat out ignoring them, right? But the thing is, when as far as the internet is concerned, people can still just go and find the person, right? There's not enough community in the world to get somebody like Alex Jones to shut his website down, or to get Harvey Weinstein out of the movie business, because he has that power, he has that capital. Like, you look at Kevin Spacey, right? He was kind of the first, as far as I can remember, when the Me Too movement came around and the things he did were brought to light publicly. Like, he was one of the first people that was canceled. He was kicked off of his show, but here he's back. He's back and he's doing what he always did, and he's probably really doing what he always did and preying on people, and people just forget so fast. It's so easy to watch somebody be good in a movie or something, or in the case of Alex Jones, like, if what he says ever appealed to you, and you didn't stop doing that, you didn't stop listening to him or anything like that, like, you're still part of the audience. He still has all the reach he ever had. He just doesn't get to post it on YouTube or on Twitter or wherever
Right.
he was kicked off of.
The main material difference is for the people who are benefiting or profiting off of YouTube and Twitter. The case of Mila Yiannopoulos, I sent you an idiotic Mashable article that was talking about how Milianopoulos is proof that cancel culture works. The point of the article was basically like he was on Twitter and then Twitter removed him because he harassed Leslie Jones in relation to Ghostbusters, and like it was basically putting it was creating a narrative that like this was because of people on Twitter being pissed off, as if somehow the justice was served, when in reality, I mean, he went away for a little while. He also quit Breitbart after he made those comments in support of pedophilia, but but the difference then was that those companies weren't profiting off of his name. I mean, if somebody's ideas are profitable, if somebody's making money off of their brand or whatever, as Alex Jones is with his supplements.
Well, but that's the thing, is they don't leave. We just don't see them in the places that we're used to seeing them. But I mean, YouTube still does make money off Alex Jones, presumably because people make, hit pieces about Alex Jones, or they do video essays or anything they do about Alex Jones. If like there's ad money rolling in from that, and from there still being outrage about what Alex Jones does, these people don't go anywhere, and their influence doesn't go away. If anybody makes a video about Alex Jones, somebody's getting put onto Alex Jones from that.
Yeah.
People see things they don't agree with all the time, and they go and look for the opposing perspective or whatever. Mm-hmm. And YouTube still makes money off Alex Jones from those hit pieces and the video essays and the takedowns and all this. Or even just the silly videos.
Also.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how Twitter makes money outside of like selling ad space.
It's ads. I mean, but I mean, yeah, same thing though. There's so many white nationalists on Twitter, and Twitter has a notoriously lenient hate speech policy. They didn't move. It wasn't them like deciding like, oh, we really should exercise our hate speech policy when they removed Milo. It was just like, oh, we might lose money if we don't. And so they removed the one person out of all the people.
Yeah, I mean, you see the replies on any like woke person's tweet about anything, whether it's like mask wearing or unfortunately the Holocaust was trending today. Don't know if you saw that. The Holocaust was trending today because apparently 1 in 10 Americans under 40 were unaware of the term, claimed to have never heard the term.
The term Holocaust?
The term Holocaust, yeah. 1 in 10 under 40.
Oh, shit.
I think I have the number right on that even. I don't think I'm exaggerating that.
Wow.
But
that's like the Holocaust denier's wet dream. It's just for people to forget that it happened.
Well, no kidding. But you look on anything like this, and the thing that you can't help but see is the Nazis and the fascists and the racists or the homophobes, or you can't help but see these people because they put like a special section of a Twitter replies thread devoted to people who say awful things. Right?
Really?
Well, yeah, you have the place where you have the place at the bottom where it's like it says like, oh, these tweets are offensive or inflammatory or whatever it says. These are the nasty replies.
So effectively, it's just a sorting. It's just a sorting mechanism for people who are shitty.
And that's only the one that the ones that the algorithm catches. The rest of them are just out there, and you see them all the time. Like Twitter doesn't.
I think it's generally true that capitalism, all that companies operating under a capitalist model can do, in terms of disincentivizing. Well, here's the thing. Capitalist companies, they aren't incentivized to, for moral reasons, disincentivize hate speech. They aren't incentivized to do it at all, because if somebody wants to be spending time on their platform and they're profiting off of the mere just existence of somebody's presence, interactions on their platform, why would you discourage that? Unless, of course, you had a real sense of social responsibility that extended into the future, in which case you probably wouldn't be a capitalist.
Yeah, you don't get to be the
So
company with the biggest like market share by shutting groups out, right? They if something generates clicks and it generates traffic and more people put their eyes on ads and everything, like they have no reason to do it because they'll probably get more shit by I bet YouTube got more shit about taking Alex Jones off than they ever got for leaving him on. So
that's a good way to put it,
in
because it's organized shit from people who have money versus just people
exactly like
whining.
regardless of like whatever they lose by in ad revenue and taking him off, like it's even worse for them, which is why it's so much of a bigger surprise when they do it because number one, you don't expect them to. Nobody that asks for it, I think, really expects them to, unless they're just like pie in the sky.
That's the thing.
Think about how much you know how much of a blow it was for Twitter to just like put the warning under politicians' tweets that they're lying. Like, think what it took. Think of everything that happened leading up to that. Every false statement that was made and disseminated, amongst people that people that like the politician in question, people that don't like them. Like that information got out there. It's not like it goes away just because there's a misinformation label on it. But like, think about what it took for them to do that. I mean, how many important lies that like shape policy and discourse amongst the public and everything. Like, frankly, I think we're pretty much at the end of that sort of thing. I don't think we're getting too much more of it. I mean, I'm surprised that I, of like companies, you know, going out of their way to make social responsibility like a feature of the platform.
Mm-hmm.
Like they do it like in a disaster, right?
Yeah.
Like if somebody's creating like a shitstorm on the platform, they'll step in and do it.
But for every disaster, there's people who are watching and recording how important was, like, how vital was the company's performed reaction to a perceived injustice for their continued existence. There's always people who are like taking notes on that shit. There's always people who are willing later to push the boundaries further, like against any kind of social responsibility, which I mean, it goes right to your point.
Yeah, I just don't think we're going to see much more of it, which is again like it's why I don't think cancel culture works. I wish there was a way that it could. Like it just doesn't work because there's a million platforms out there. I mean, Alex Jones could go be on like he could probably be like I mean, friggin' Erdogan. He could set him up with something, or Putin could set him. Friggin' Kanye on Twitter today called himself Baby Putin. Baby Putin, he called himself, and like between the like pictures of sensitive contractual information and calling himself Putin and all this, the only tweet of his and a friggin' tweet of him of a video of him peeing, like the only thing that gets taken down is somebody's address, and that's good, but like these companies will only act in as far as they are helpless from not acting, right? They have to do it. Like that video of Kanye, I bet he's still got him peeing on his friggin' timeline. And like that should be gone because like he shouldn't be on Twitter. I mean, he's obviously not like capable of handling a Twitter right now. Donald Trump is not capable of handling a Twitter. I'm assuming he even curates his own Twitter. I'm sure that's Sarah Sanders or somebody. Whoever is the press secretary now. But these companies only act when their hand is forced. They don't do it because they're benevolent or because they believe in what they do.
And their hand is only forced in certain situations. Like you just said.
Like Kanye docs somebody. The tweet that gets deleted is Kanye doxing somebody. It's not Kanye, like, if they were like dealing in social responsibility, they would be like, this guy shouldn't have a Twitter. I mean, that's not what happened to. I mean, did Alex Jones get his Twitter revoked? It wasn't about this guy shouldn't have a Twitter, and we're a private company, and this isn't an issue of censorship. It was like, this guy is creating problems for us right now, so we're gonna get rid of him. Like, it's the same thing. It's the same thing with the content warnings. The fact that we don't have these is causing us a problem, so we'll put them in. But like, how much more of that do you get? Facebook doesn't seem willing. I'm not on Facebook, so I don't know what they do.
Facebook is another example of a company where the best they can do is just categorize things. They categorize their information. When it's fake news, they put false news on it or whatever. And they also had been pushing at least for a few years for people for like their groups feature, trying to get people to spend as much time consuming ads, in a Facebook group rather than just on their timeline. Because why? Because you get what you expect. You get people who have similar opinions to you. And even when you're not in a group, you're seeing mostly stuff that is going to agree with what you think. And it's easy today to be like, oh, well, yeah, well, I don't want to see, I unfriended all those people who were Trump supporters. But what we forget really quickly is like the last 10 years of like Facebook exacerbating the problem. Like, it's easy to say now, well, I'm different enough from all these other people to like be disgusted by what they have to say. But I think there's an aspect of it where it's like, well, if we hadn't had that last 10 years of this happening, of like there being a monetary incentive to surround us with like increasingly extreme versions of like, I don't know. Well, I don't want to say that because that makes it sound like what I believe in is extreme. But what I mean is like, it's just like we're farther and farther away from each other, and ideologically to the point that like communication becomes very difficult, or that it appears as though there's a social cost to trying to communicate with people who we disagree with, which like there is. And there's another reading of this where it's just like, this is a part of the progression of things, and it was gonna happen somehow anyways. But the idea that Facebook is under our control, or that we can then like pressure Facebook to do things to make the world better and to actually meaningfully stop the spread of harmful information, is just completely naive.
The people that control these companies are not like conscious people that care about what's happening on the platform. It's shareholders who are out to make as much money as possible because they've invested their money, and they need to see a return. And like, you don't get that by kicking people off or shutting people out. It's like a drastic measure when it happens, and it's something that they, it sends people to other platforms and makes those worth investing in because there's big presences on them. What is that? Yeah. What is that Twitter alternative that a bunch of conservatives were talking about going to?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know either. I think it started with a P.
Ptolemy?
But yeah, it was all roads lead to the last great dynasty of Egypt.
Ptolemaic Egypt. Yeah, it's a great platform.
They were really good guys. Yeah, I don't know what the name of the platform is, but like when these people get kicked off Twitter, I mean, is Milo Yiannopoulos on Twitter? Ben Shapiro's on Twitter. Alex Jones was on Twitter. If they go somewhere else, then that becomes like an attractive place for people to invest. And
right. Either there's going to be a bifurcation outside of the company or within the company. If you can't keep those people separated within your control and your ability to make a profit, they're just going to go somewhere else.
The thing that like I've done, like canceling people works as an individual, right? I unfollow and mute and block, and if I see like an annoying channel pop up in my recommendations on YouTube or whatever, I tell YouTube to make it stop. But as far as like, groups of people go, you can't cancel, and you can't cancel because you're not going to get an entire population of Twitter people to mute an offensive person or whatever. Like, the only thing you can do is do it yourself, and that's not. It doesn't impact the bottom line unless you're like stopping being a customer or you're a person with influence.
I want to try to like bring in something else here, which I think is another part of the conversation that we haven't touched on yet. First I want to say I think the fact that like you need to like there's an expectation to accommodate like bigoted opinions within a platform so that you don't lose money is related to the fact that like we're expected to believe that if you shun people whose opinions you don't like in public, or you materially try to make it harder for them to speak, you're obstructing and devaluing democracy or something like that, or the ability for ideas to float freely, and soon it's going to be you who gets persecuted. The thing that I have a problem with is that people, leftists, anyways, already have that problem. Like, I was talking to a friend about the history of anarchism the other day, and my friend was like, why don't you just call yourself a libertarian? And it's like, because my friend has a perception that the word anarchist is a bad thing to be. And it's like, just because the media has that perception, to me that says you don't know about this basically continuous campaign over the last at least 100 years in this country to make anarchist a bad word that I didn't know about until fairly recently in my political life. And it also says, like, because of that, you're never going to actually hear what I actually believe. You're never going to entertain the idea that certain ideas that you have might actually be left-wing ideas. And that's the power of it. So just sort of going from that, I wanted to also talk about this other case of cancel culture where people who don't have as much power get hurt by internet mobs, and how this is related, because I think there's some nuance that's needed here. I don't think it's the same to say like, oh, it's good that like somebody making a racist joke on Twitter got like just T-boned with like a train of internet hate. The reason I think that's bad is because, I mean, I'm thinking of this one example from this video I just watched. I can't remember the name of the person, but she made a racist joke and then flew to South Africa, and by the time she got there, she was like fired from her job and stuff like that. She doesn't have the same level of like the rules are different for normal people who do shitty things. The rules are different, and they should be different for those people. And I think that because we do have relatively a lot more influence over the lives of normal people who make mistakes, or who need to like learn something, it reinforces the individualistic idea that like one person with relatively little capital and power being harmed or being reprimanded sort of implies that somebody like Jeff Bezos or Jack Dorsey or whoever can be affected in a similar way. When we need to remember that for all intents and purposes, these people are of a completely different class than us. They have completely different privileges, abilities, access to capital, and levels of influence in the world. And to keep trying to cancel even moderately successful people who have ties to like people with real money and real power in the world, to keep like trying to do that, or it's like vote with your dollars. What I'm saying is because there's this aspect of Twitter that sort of levels every person who has a Twitter profile as being in some way the same. It supports the illusion that there is some kind of individual in society that is accessible to everybody equally, like that you can be a free individual in the same way as rich billionaires can be. That equalizing is dangerous, and acting in this toxic way towards people who are pretty much have the same class interests as you it just perpetuates the problem. That's what I'm saying. It actually makes it harder for us to realize the futility of cancel culture and move on from that and find other tactics.
Yeah, cancel culture is also like pretty arbitrary in how it shakes out when the conversation's over with. Like, think about that lady a couple of months ago who was walking her dog where she shouldn't have been, and some guy confronted her about it. It was a black guy that was out watching. He was out like bird watching or something, and he confronted her about walking
Yeah.
her dog. I don't know whether she was like in a non-dog area of the park or if she didn't have a leash on the dog or something. But
She didn't have a leash. That's what
yeah.
it was.
So she says, and she's on camera saying that like, oh, she's gonna call the police and she's gonna tell them that a black guy threatened her life, or whatever it is that she said. Compare that to the two lawyers, right? That during the recent Black Lives Matter protests that stepped out of their law office or their home or whatever it was, finger on the trigger of their gun, pointing it at people and all this. Those people, like, they got invited to speak at the RNC, and
Wow, I didn't know that.
you didn't know that? Oh yeah, they spoke at the RNC, and you know the the lady that tried to get the black guy killed by calling the police on him and lying, she gets fired, and I mean, she probably has the benefit of a level of anonymity because she's not, she's probably not a licensed professional that has to be like, you probably, I don't know, I've never had a lawyer for anything, but I mean, I imagine you probably like run pretty extensive check before you hire somebody as your lawyer and all this. But these people just arbitrarily get elevated, when they did a pretty equal thing. I mean, they used their position in which they are able to inflict violence without repercussions. People, especially right now, like to pretend that violence is beating somebody up or actually shooting them or something. But violence has a lot of different shapes in the world today. And I mean, both those people used the position of power that they have over another individual or another group of people, and face wildly different consequences, even though they essentially did the same thing. So it's the way cancel culture works is like arbitrary. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people have, I mean, essentially, like them speaking at the RNC is just an advertisement for their law firm.
Yeah. There's also the possibility in this case that she, but this woman, she might have considered herself to be a progressive person, or at least somebody who would vote for Joe Biden. You know what I mean? She might be very well be a Democrat. She might like, even though she said something that she must have known was racist, that doesn't necessarily mean that she was thinking about it at the time. It still like is racist. So what I'm saying is like that aspect of it, her threatening state violence on this guy, it is the same. Not only is it arbitrary the consequences people face, it's often arbitrary the internal narrative that they're telling themselves when they enact violence. And she was canceled. Do I think that she should have lost her job? There's a strong sense in which I'm just kind of like, yeah, good. I'm glad she lost her job, because that's the way that it feels like things should play out in the world today. But on the other hand, there's a part of me that politically believes everybody should have access to resources and food, and for a second is like, well, did she? And then of course the next thing I think is, well, yes, she did. Like, she had more capital than most people that I personally interact with day to day. She has a support network of people, of other white people. So she's fine. Materially, she's fine. It's not sad that she lost her job. It's sad that she said something so horrible to this guy.
All I mean to say is that when it there's like a sliding scale of how how you can be impacted by cancel culture, because the reality is, in the same way that those two shitty lawyers got to run an ad campaign for their law office by pointing guns at people protesting violence, maybe she gets a better job. That's the thing. That's the thing about
That's
getting fired.
yeah.
Maybe you get a better job. I I got fired from my last job. I got a better job. I have a better job now. Like, and I didn't get fired because I was violent, but I mean, I did get fired for being a shithead. Like, I didn't want to be there. Everybody knew I didn't want to be there. I didn't make it any secret that I didn't want to be there. And it's just like, you know, people have privilege, and there's that sliding scale of like how it affects you, because like as far as I can tell, like I'm pretty sure Terry Crews is done. Like I think Terry Crews' career is pretty much over, right? Because he's being a shithead right now.
What happened?
He's just being a shithead. He's like, I mean, he had like a huge part in my perception of the Me Too movement. Like he had a big part of that, and
Yeah, that was the last thing the last association I have with Terry Crews was him speaking out about being sexually abused.
yeah.
So what's this?
So, according to Wikipedia, in March 2019, Crews faced criticism and backlash after responding to a New York Times op-ed by human rights lawyer Derica Purnell, who stated, "Love is not gendered. A child will not starve with only one gender loving them." Crews responded, "But they will be severely malnourished." Crews deleted the tweet and apologized the next day after speaking with his Brooklyn Nine-Nine co-star. Or Gina Carano, who is a character on The Mandalorian. She was getting some flack for not pretending like she didn't understand why people put pronouns in their bio on social media, and so she put her pronouns as like beep bop boop, something like that. That's what she put as her pronouns in response to her getting backlash about this. But guess what? She's famous. She was like a famous athlete, and now she's a famous actress on one of the biggest TV shows going right now. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if she gets fired from this job, because she's got like a face that people recognize and that, probably more than a couple of people are attracted to. And she's gonna be able to keep acting. But like Terry Crews, does Terry Crews like? I don't think he should. I mean, should somebody that is, that is like homophobic or transphobic or racist or anything, like, why should they be able to, succeed in the world? But that should be like, the people deciding that an individual, doesn't get to keep being in front of them. Like, in the trivia for The Fifth Element, that like you can play during the movie, Chris Tucker talks about what it's like being a young black actor, and he's saying like, you don't get a lot of choice because there are only a couple of big black actors in Hollywood at any given time. I read about the same thing in an article about Dave Chappelle, because I just watched Robin Hood Men in Tights. They talk about like you don't get to you don't really have a great selection of roles, so you have to make sure you do good work and like be in good movies and everything, even though you don't get like a pick of great movies, because if you're young and you're black and you do a bad movie, then your career's done. And I read this article about Dave Chappelle after watching Men in Tights the other day, and he was talking about like, yeah, there's the head, there's this thing called the head Negro in charge, and it's this idea that like, well, if Chris Rock is big and Kevin Hart is big, then where else is there room for like a loud, big personality black comedian to be in Hollywood? Like, there's not room for it. And like, I liked seeing Terry Crews in the movies that I've seen Terry Crews in. I mean, I liked him in The Expendables or whatever. Like, it's fun every now and then to see him in an Old Spice ad. But like, you know, when you fuck up like that, certain people are immune to it. Of course, Kanye West is a billionaire; he's immune to it. Nothing's gonna stop Kanye West. But there's this thing that even cancel culture, I think, disproportionately affects people of color, in where almost always it seems to benefit powerful white people. You know, it's another reason why even though I support like the notion of it, I'm not convinced that it can, has, or will ever work.
Yeah, I think it assumes too much of liberalism as just the background of the world. It assumes too many of the assumptions of, I don't know, liberal democracy as it exists to support capitalism are just the way things have to be. Kind of like when people go and say, oh, human nature is that we're greedy. Well, it's like, well, if you want to define human nature as a process that evolves as much as any other social aspect of our society evolves, like, yeah, like human nature sucks right now because we've been subjected to horrible, like, societal conditions. Most of us, like what I mean by most of us is I mean that the way that society is supposed to be constituted is abusive to most people in society. And to just sort of like so that therefore to just like assume that like we're supposed to believe that like there's some way that we can just I don't know, enact justice by like mobbing people online. I think it's an unhealthy idea because the
Absolutely.
way that it actually plays out, it ends up just being a drain on people's sort of like collective energy to do anything else a lot of the time. I don't have evidence for this, but what I mean is like people get pretty fired up about trying to cancel certain people, especially when they think it's within reach, when they think it's possible to cancel those people. How about we do something that maybe has a little bit more meaningful and long-lasting impact? Just in the same way, I'm not saying that we share the blame in the same way, but when a capitalist does something extremely short-sighted, somebody who has the ability to sort of like actually, I don't know, live in the world, and create a company, somebody who has enough capital to actually be a capitalist if they want to be, when they do something stupid, they get they don't get reprimanded by the people around them. They get supported by the people around them who have an incentive to believe that what they're doing is at least not worthy of critique. But so then when we go and do something short-sighted or something that only has a material effect in the extreme short term, like try to stop somebody from a relatively small, I don't know, YouTube or Twitter subculture from having a voice, which happens all the time. Like,
Well, like, you remember what happened with Goya? Do you remember what cancel culture did to Goya? It got Goya an advertisement from Ivanka Trump.
yeah,
Like, that's the good it does. Is unfortunately,
that's right.
you know, it ties in really neatly to that line you put in the notes, um, from Ben Burgess. Uh,
Pull it up.
the left has a bad tendency to view politics in moral terms rather than in strategic terms. Perpetuating moralism while doing good real world activism is worse than fiddling while the world burns, because in the case of the former, I wish you wrote in complete sentences. Because in the case of the former, undermines the other, undermines leftists' ability to gain and command real world power through collectivization. Um, like, it's absolutely true that like if cancel culture is going to work at all, like it demands strategy, which is not, I really don't think is the strong or a strength of the left, which is really unfortunate. We tend to think we don't need it, I think.
Yeah, not nowadays.
I
Yeah,
think any time that you believe that you are in the moral right, like I think the idea that you need to be strategic is like completely out of your mind, because you're thinking everybody is on the same moral compass as you, and that's just not true. And like it's not going to work to assume that, because even if people are on that same moral compass, like they're going to go out of their way to make sure that you think they're not. and like to the point where they like are actively not doing it. They're actively being even there's no I don't believe that
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of bad people don't believe that they're being immoral. There's no way that there's no way that Alex Jones thinks he's doing the right thing, or Gavin McInnes, he doesn't think he's doing the right thing. Like he's doing what's good for him.
Right. I think he at some point became comfortable with the idea that there's more important things than the right thing. And I don't mean like I don't mean I want to actively do bad. I mean I think it's usually when I was younger I would probably say, oh like, and sometimes I still would say I would even disagree with what you just said and say, well, I think most bad people think they're doing something good. I think that what I'm kind of the my position has evolved into something more like there's people who are able to suspend the question, am I doing something good or bad, like indefinitely because they found social reasons um to do so.
You ever think about how many people like Superman kills when he shoots a laser beam into a building, or like smashes up a freeway trying to catch a bad guy? Pick any superhero. Like there's there's this thing in like the collective unconscious that you know it's like the inverse of the bystander effect, right? Where the bystander effect is like if you're standing in a crowd of people, you're less likely to do the right thing because you're waiting for somebody else to do it, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's something that the left really suffers from. Whereas, you know, to me, like if the left are the bystanders, then that means
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
the people on the right are the people that we're standing by and watching, and you know, there's very few people that are willing to like step up and like lay out a plan or strategize. Like even Bernie Sanders didn't have a plan. I mean, he had lots of ideas. He had he had lots of like, especially now. Excuse me, that didn't even gross me out. Um,
I didn't hear it.
Contra lucky
That's
eggs.
true. No presidential
Um,
candidates are expected to have a plan.
yeah, there's like there's like no expectation. I agree with Bernie Sanders' platform. Like I would like to have had Bernie Sanders running for president in 2020 and to be the nominee and everything. But I'm not like naive enough to think that he had a plan. I mean, he had lots of ideas. He had lots of like, well, if the stars are right, then this will happen. But like he's not accounting for the possibility that there is like a rogue element in Congress of like what if Mitch McConnell doesn't get voted out of Kentucky whatever this year, or like what if you know what if his vice president isn't like aligned with his goals? I didn't even know who his vice president would have been. Um, like I can't think of anybody that could have potentially been vice president to Bernie Sanders that would be on the same page as him. I mean, like that's like another thing is like the left is more fractured than any other group I could think of because there's like there's like three parties that exist in the Democratic Party. There's like the conservative wing of the Democratic Party, and there's the neoliberal wing of the Democratic Party, and then there's like
I think those are the same.
the Democratic Socialists. Well, you're welcome to expound on that.
Neoliberalism is a conservative ideology that basically says we need to go back to classical liberalism and just commit all of our.
Yeah, but again,
Um,
you think I'm saying something when I say conservative, you think I'm saying something that I'm not saying.
what are you
You
saying?
think I'm talking about the right, but I'm not talking about the right. I'm talking about like the what the thing conservative means, which is like if you're being conservative, like I would call I would call like FDR conservative because he's trying to like work within the structure that exists and improve that. Like that to me is like conservative, right? It's not like
Yes.
the right today is not conservative. Like it's all about bloat and waste and all this. Like there's people that want like the military budget reduced and police budgets reduced, but they're not interested in those things being moved to social programs. They're just trying to like take money away from the government. Like
I partly agree with you, but I also think that what you're saying, what I'm saying is neoliberalism and conservative wing of Democratic Party are
yeah,
the
but I
same.
think neoliberals are bad guys though. I don't think conservatives. I don't think like what I think of when I say the word conservative. I don't think those guys are bad guys. I disagree with them. Like, but I don't think they're bad guys. Neoliberals to me are bad guys. Like Rand Paul to me is like a neoliberal. Like I
Yes.
don't think he's like an alt right guy.
Right. All the Reagan boys.
All the Reagan boys, yeah. I I was I was really hype on I was really hyped for Rand Paul or what's his name? Ron Paul when when I was in like junior high. And I mean the only reason I had back then was because I thought he was the guy that was like, "Oh man, he's going to make weed legal just in time for me to turn 18. That'll be great." Like that's all that was in my head, but Rand Paul is like a totally different animal than that guy. It's like they probably they probably don't even sit at the same table on holidays. But you know, to me like neoliberals are the bad guys in the Democratic Party. The conservatives are like they're like a good group, and we like they could be aligned with the like social democrat and further left. Like it's entirely possible that they could be, but because like it's one party consisting of many different ideologies. Like
Yeah.
the right has been able to unify and like strategize because it's all like Trump centric. It's all based on like the Trump nonsense
Right.
that happens in America now. Like that is what the right is. No, like death and taxes is like the thing that they celebrate. They have like a vested interest only in like crapping on people. Like they have no principles. They have no real like politics. They're not interested in policy. They just want to like deregulate and privatize like every arm of the government. I mean, they probably would have rather have Blackwater and or whatever it is now. Like they would probably rather have that than like the National Guard because Blackwater will like do exactly as they're told and what they're paid. Like like there's this really serious fragmentation in the left that
Exactly.
does not exist in the right. Like the right has galvanized around Trump. I think this ties in pretty neatly actually that we have like abused the position of power as humans, being very intelligent, being very capable of creating tools and systems and being able to analyze behavior and all this. Like I think we've abused that and it's I'm not going to say that it's catching up with us now. It's always been catching up with us. Like as long as there's like history that I can read of something, you can see the parallels in between then and now and how our nature is at loggerheads with I think what I think what most people really want in life is against our nature because everything that we do is within our nature. I mean, what Mitch McConnell's doing is human nature. What AOC does is human nature. What Bernie Nature, that would have been a good name for him to run under. What Bernie Sanders does is like human nature, but there's this idea that you know the human spirit or whatever it is like capable of anything, and I think we have to like step away from our perception of ourselves to figure out what we're gonna do, and that's part of the problem with the left moralizing and failing to strategize and like to consider like what is actually at stake, do you think, if the left fails to galvanize and the right becomes tighter and tighter, and Ivanka is president 4 years from now, or like Eric and Don Jr. sew themselves together and become the joint president.
I've listened to some stuff recently that's made me reconsider and broaden my idea of fascism.
Do you think it's a matter of if, or do you think it's a matter of when?
It's a matter of when, and I think it's also a matter of for how long. I don't think it's going to be for hundreds of years. I
don't think the U.S. has hundreds of years.
Exactly. I think I've touched on the comparison with ancient Rome, where like the Republic ends, the Republic, which was never very democratic, imperial currents take over within the government, and it's one of those situations where the modern conception of emperor is basically an archetype that was created by a process, and as that process was playing out, the idea didn't exist yet. So it's important to remember that fascism didn't exist before the 20th century. Aspects of it did, but it didn't consolidate, didn't coalesce into something till then. What's going on now can rightly be called fascism. I think should be called fascism at this point, but might have a different name in the future.
These things happen fast. I mean, it was how long was it between Hitler getting out of jail and becoming the head of state of Germany? People don't like comparisons to Hitler because they like to pretend that only happened once and it can't happen again because everybody knows. But a lot of people really admire Adolf Hitler. If they didn't, we wouldn't have Nazis. Yeah, he was, according to Wikipedia, he was the Führer of the Nazi Party from 1921 to 1945. And he was Chancellor of Germany for more of that time than he wasn't Chancellor of Germany. It happens fast. 20 years, or the 11 years that it took for him to become Chancellor of Germany. That's not a long time. That's 3 presidential terms, and I'm fairly certain we're looking at a second Trump term 47 days from now. I think it's inevitable. The DNC probably got what they wanted by picking Biden. They probably wanted 4 more years of Trump, and then after that 4 years of whichever Trump gets voted in after him. I'm fairly certain they got what they want, and at that point we're looking at the same amount of time that it took Hitler to rise to power in Germany.
It's times like these when I really ask myself, why did the U.S. base its government on an already corrupted version of the Roman Senate, where one senator had risen to the position of de facto head of state?
Or how about the fact that the Nazis based their techniques on things America did? How about that? People don't like that. I don't particularly like it, but it's true. I don't, for one reason or another, probably because it makes people feel better, but we like to pretend that it can't happen here. Just same as, every time I smoke a cigarette, I really, really like to think that cancer won't happen to me, but I like eating food that's bad for me, and I like smoking cigarettes that are bad for me, and I like drinking alcohol, which is bad for me. I don't like it that much, but I really like cider. We let things happen that are bad for us because we'll find something to appreciate during the time that it's happening. I mean, I don't spend a ton of time. Really, I don't spend much time at all outside of the podcast these days thinking about what America looks like at the end of Donald Trump's fourth term, you know. But it's there, it's looming, and I think we're not as far away from fascism as people want to think we are, especially people that, you know, people that think, well, we'll be okay after, even if Trump does have a second term, we'll be okay after that. You know, things will swing back to the left and we'll be okay. Like,
yeah, it's a mistake.
Things like if Trump wins this election, which I think it's a safe bet, whether he actually wins it or he just gets to say that he won it, or Putin says that he won it, or whatever. I think regardless of that, like I think I think without the left deciding to galvanize, because I think there's more of us. I really do. But most of us are also pretty comfortable because of, whatever things we find that make us comfortable, we're more comfortable. People on the right are constantly agitated. Everything agitates them. Like people wearing masks agitates them. People saying like you should wear a mask agitates them. Like that's the thing, is they're always active. They're always like beating their chest. And people like me, people like a lot of people I bet are pretty like, I can't say only anything but non-agitated. I mean, I'm frustrated. I'm not happy with it. I'm going to go to the polls on election day so that I know DeJoy isn't going to fuck with my vote. But with that said, like, it's going to require a lot more than like deciding that I'm going to vote in a pretty hopeless election.
I posted on Facebook a few weeks ago, like, I'm going to vote for Biden. I hate it, but I'm going to do it. And one of my friends was like, you shouldn't do that. Or they didn't say that. They said you should consider voting for some third-party candidates to get their names out there because you're in New York State. Because New York State's going to be blue no matter what. The number of people who aren't going to do what...
That's true.
Yeah. And I've kind of been sitting with it, and I think it's true, but it's also not real activism to do that. And also the person they suggested was like a Leninist, I think, like covertly. And I'm not about that.
I definitely don't think it's activism. I mean, it's like...
Yeah.
I mean, it's the least you can do is hope that by voting for a third-party candidate, you put a name out there. A third-party candidate is not going to ever win an election because they're not allowed to, essentially. I mean, look at the election that put George Bush in office. The third-party candidate split the vote, and Al Gore didn't win.
I can see happening though. I can see a fascist party straight out being like, we're going to have Donald Trump as our candidate and getting that to happen. And then the Republican Party becoming the Democratic Party, and then the Democratic Party ceases to be relevant. And then after that, the fascists completely consolidate power and there's no parties.
And the thing about that is that they have the police on their side because the police are already on their side. When they put on the uniform, they have like declared loyalty to the fascist arm of the U.S. government. The police are on their side. I have to assume that a pretty good portion of the military is on their side. The people that aren't on their side are a lot of people that I imagine are pretty much just like me. And some like really tight out there punk rock kids that are not gonna like they're not gonna sit like I probably will and let fascism happen. I hate to say it about myself, but like at the end of the day, like it's gonna come to violence one way or another. I think the violence might even be worse when Trump wins, because they'll be emboldened, they'll be protected, like, and I don't personally want to be part of it, but like, so like, what am I gonna do?
Yeah, yeah.
I have to. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna vote for Joe Biden and cross my fingers. like for now, that's like the thing that I have to do. Unless like something changes and I have like I get like I wake up and I hit my head on the door or something someday. Like I'm probably not going to join a resistance. I'm going to try and get my passport in order and
Just wanted to say to everybody who's listening, don't not vote for Joe Biden where it matters. Electoral politics are a joke, but like don't not do that because more people will probably die. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I think we really underestimate how many people are going to be voting for Trump. I think your vote does matter. I think you should get out there and vote for the only person on the ballot that could beat Trump at all, possibly. Like, I think you have to do that.
nobody wants to be caught being like, "Oh, like I hope Biden will win," like unironically, because it's like, but I hope Biden will win.
I don't want Biden to win. If the election were real, there would be like 30 nominees. But it's not, and it probably never will be. And so please, like, if you're on the same wavelength as me, please vote for Joe Biden. Don't vote for a third party candidate because that is a vote for Trump. Like, truly it is. I don't want Joe Biden running for president. I only halfway want Bernie running for president because like once again he didn't have like the gumption. He did his best. Like maybe I'll be more positive when AOC runs 4 years from now, or well, Jesus, I can't even think of anybody else. I can't even think of anybody else that's like out there like putting up a fight.
Yeah.
But
I mean, they exist, but they don't have it. They're totally disenfranchised in terms of national politics.
exactly because the DNC doesn't want them. The DNC doesn't want anything to do with it. They're happy with Trump. But like, vote for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Like, don't think about what happens if Trump is in office for 4 more years, and like vote like you're gonna change that. And
But don't invest. But don't invest too much in it.
well, you don't have to invest that much in Joe Biden because I bet he's dead soon. I bet he's pretty.
You don't have to invest anything in pushing a button on a ballot box or ticking a box. You can just do it. It's not a big deal. You've taken out the trash before. It's like that.
We spent a lot of time talking about cancel culture, which is it's a fine thing to talk about, but it was not the topic of this episode. We have to turn to the actual topic, which is woke culture, and I'm hoping Leo can expound a little more on what woke culture means to him, because I think I spent a lot of time talking about it last episode, and a lot this episode with how it ties into cancel culture. But I don't know what it means to you.
Well, the phrasing woke culture kind of smacks of scorn, like kind of a conservative scorn for it, which partly misunderstands it. So there's an extent to which it's not even really meaningful to talk about woke culture as woke culture, like as such.
Do you think partly misunderstands or deliberately
Misunderstands.
Okay.
If you want to talk about why people talk about such things in this way to begin with, it's similar to like, why do people talk about cultural Marxism? Why did Jordan Peterson make all that money talking about what's his phrase, left-wing neo-Marxists, something like that? I don't know. Just like this idea of
I'll have
this
to
idea of a
Jordan
thing.
Peterson.
Don't.
I'm not going to.
It's not
Trust
worth
me.
it. This idea of something that's just like constituted wrongly on purpose, not just somebody who's trying to be a part of a community and kind of like fumbling for a straw man, and maybe knows that they're a little bit dishonest. But I mean, like people who actually like don't have any interest in understanding, don't have any interest in feeling right, because that's not really what's motivating them here. So yeah, woke culture, it's mostly that, but it's one of those things that I think there's a spectrum of sort of appropriatability into the culture of the people who are being named and described by their political or ideological adversaries. Another example of this would be how people have kind of taken up the term neo-Marxist as if it's a good thing. Said like, oh, this sounds positive to me, a Marxist, like cool, like a postmodern neo-Marxist. That's the phrase I was thinking
So
of.
why is it not?
So why is it not that? Why is it not just good?
Like, what makes it bad? Because
I think what
people are gonna find when we do episodes like this, I don't like know these terms, like
I don't what well the reason that I said all this is because I don't really know if it's a meaningful thing. It's kind of like saying PC culture,
yeah.
which doesn't really mean anything. Political correctness, the concept, is different from wokeness, mostly because it was coined by conservatives um, to criticize a perceived tendency among, I don't know, I think like the less conservative fellows as too worried about how their terminology sounded, and wokeness, the idea of being woke, is actually like a Black English term that is tied to online culture in a lot of people's mind. That just means like
It's like a shade of
just sort
enlightenment.
of being tuned into like the way the world is and understanding and caring about like why things are, often in the context of like people's struggles and oppression and the systems that create those oppressions and struggles. Yeah, so there's a difference in terms of like like what the term means, what its connotations are, but attaching culture to anything, cancel culture, PC culture, woke culture, always seems to imply. It seems to imply like it's polite to roll your eyes when you hear this being said. That's how I would sum it up, and that's how it gets treated when it's written about a lot of the time by people who aren't saying, "Oh, this is actually good."
It's treated as a countercultural movement.
It's treated as a countercultural movement, as an element within culture.
It kind of is. It kind of is a countercultural element because it's not. It's not the most pervasive.
Right, and as much as anything is a countercultural movement when it's named by people from outside of it, who have some established authority in the naming of things. Changing people's opinions doesn't amount to changing the systems that are informed by previous opinions. So what I'm saying is the world is constituted in a certain way, in a world where we have people who are actively oppressed because of their racial identity. And the construction of racial identities, for example, is one of the many steps in the process that created a system where that's an issue. If you just took away the people who are actively against racial equity, the systems would still exist. There would still be systems in place that would, for a long period of time, continue perpetuating like racist violence on people. You would actually have to go in and disarm those systems in this much the same way you would have to disarm a bomb that had been created previously, so that it wouldn't still go off with the intentions pre-programmed into it by the people who had a malintention.
Yeah, but like I'm not saying that like everybody's mind's just going to change one time. I'm saying that like if there was an effort to put people in power who believe in racial equity, who work for racial equity, like it doesn't require the same active involvement as it takes to be against those things. Like AOC or Ayanna Pressley or Bernie Sanders, like they don't have to make an effort to put in the good work for a disadvantaged community or a disenfranchised community, I should say, because they're not disadvantaged. They're a disadvantage is like cosmic coincidence, and this is something that's done on purpose. Like they're not making any extra effort in the way that Mitch McConnell is. Like it's probably more work for him to not sign important bills than it is for him to just do it and let it be voted on. Like it takes more to be against like the good things that could be happening in America right now. Like it takes a more concerted effort. Thank you for listening to Depth Perception. You can support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, kicking us a little bit of scratch on Patreon.